Hey you, it's true, and after a little break we are getting a new SSR unit in Evertale, a Sleeping Beauty aka Talia 2.0, while her Earth version introduced Cursed Sleep into the game over 1 year ago. This water version focuses on forced sleep and is basically a Giga Reloader for a sleep team. Her speed is moderately high at 399, but given her skill set, this is still pretty high, I would say. Let's check out her first active skill, that is Hypnoblast Plus, basically an upgrade over Cinderella's Hypnoblast from 1 year ago. What's the plus? What's the upgrade? That is basically that the RNG sleep that can hit a unit potentially when this skill is used against them is actually a forced sleep now. So even if they have already slept while on the battlefield, it can still apply. Other than that, it's the same, 50% damage to one enemy, 300% damage on every second time, ignoring counter stance, skin passive skills, and doesn't wake up sleeping targets. Now the next one is where it gets interesting. This is where we get into the Giga Reloader territory basically. Instead of the Chrono Chaos Sleeping Beauty, or rather Water Sleeping Beauty, comes with the Mass Sleep. 3 spirit cost, instant skill, so one-time unit, and it targets all units on the battlefield other than the user. Important to point out here, all units on the battlefield includes your own team members. But what does it do? It grants all fire, earth, and dark targets the sleep status effect for 200 time units, and all water, storm, and light targets the sleep status effect for 50 time units. This is a forced sleep effect, so even if these units have already slept, they will be put to sleep, and afterwards this skill is locked for 300 time units, which is quite a long time. But if you put all your enemies to sleep for 200 time units, then suddenly it's not all that long anymore. So they kind of needed to make it that long, otherwise there would be the abuse potential to keep your enemies permanently asleep if the elements are fire, earth, or dark. Now straight away it becomes obvious that you really only want to kind of use Water Sleeping Beauty if you run her together with water, storm, or light units, or units that come with a stealth shield, for example, or a certain sleep immunity. Otherwise, you run the danger of sleeping your own team longer than the enemies. Of course, this skill is basically just a setup for her to do the real damage with the next skill, the Piercing Nightmare. 0 spirit, upfront cost, 130 time units, base length. This skill deals 400% damage to all enemies and actually 600% if they are sleeping, ignoring damage reduction effects and not waking up sleeping enemies. So that is quite a potent attack. And on top of that, there's also a chance to put non-sleeping enemies that are hit to sleep. To be exact, there's a 50% chance that this forced sleep applies, and this is very interesting if you are facing units that have a sleep ward, because after the sleep ward is gone through to the mass sleep, the Piercing Nightmare has a 50% chance of putting them to sleep anyways. However, this does not ignore stealth, so units like Kaguya might be safe from this Mass Sleep Piercing Nightmare combo. Piercing Nightmare is only usable if there is a sleeping enemy on the battlefield, which makes sense because otherwise this skill would be overpowered. But there's another caveat, and that is allies lose 1 spirit for each sleeping enemy hit by this attack. So similar to Storm Reloader 2.0's Giga Time Strike, the Mass Sleep Piercing Nightmare combo is actually super spirit hungry. And if this Piercing Nightmare skill would use up more spirit than your team actually has, this skill becomes locked for 200 time units. We have a look at her last skill, the Head Trick, referring to her summer head and making up for a lot of the spirit consumption in the 2 prior skills. This one costs 70 time units, produces 3 spirit, but on top of that, she deals 500% damage to one enemy, life flips if needed, and allies gain spirit equal to the number of units that are sleeping or have slept while on the battlefield after this attack. Again, this is including your own team. So generally speaking, this skill could produce up to 10 spirit in one go, very much making up for the potential spirit loss of 7 with the 2 prior skills. What's crazy about this skill is that it doesn't have any conditions whatsoever. Yes, it doesn't have any fancy ignores like we are used to nowadays, but it produces an enormous amount of spirit. It can life flip her and it gives 500% damage. All that for just 70 time unit cost. So I think quite amazing. However, it could wake up sleeping enemies. Now let's look at her passives, and the first one is creatively named Sleeping Beauty, so exactly the name of the unit. That one is a first, I think. Similar to the counter skin that isn't the skin from Mordred, Sleeping Beauty has a sleep skin that isn't really a sleep skin or doesn't count as a skin passive skill if she gets attacked and survives on more than 1 HP. Actually, she grants a random non-sleeping enemy the sleep status effect for 200 time units, then it isn't necessarily the attacker. So attacks that ignore skin passive skills cannot ignore this effect. Furthermore, allies gain 1 spirit each time a sleeping unit on the battlefield gets the turn. That again includes your own team. Quite a good spirit reduction there. And this unit cannot be defeated by damage from burn status effects. Just looking at her first passive, this doesn't seem all that important, but it becomes more interesting when we look at the Dream Defense, her second passive. When any other unit on the battlefield is sleeping again, apparently including your own team, she gains 50% damage reduction from attacks, and then we see something for the very first time, a probability-based hold ground that is scaling with Awakenings. Her base chance to survive any attacks that would defeat her is 40%, and 15% comes on top for every awakening up to 100%. So if you have her fully awakened, she basically has a permanent hold ground plus as long as there's any unit asleep on the battlefield, which is a condition that can be easily fulfilled. But the hold ground plus here comes with a caveat: it is vulnerable to any poison. The burn exception from the prior passive applies, of course, but poison can kill her off, because specifically Zigzag is mentioning here that she can survive any attack that would defeat this unit, not any damage. And then there's the second part of her second passive, and that is each time a sleeping ally gets the turn, they will have the time unit costs for all of their skills reduced by 20%, and until the end of the next turn their attack is increased by 50%. Funnily enough, yet again another part of her skill set where allies that are sleeping actually benefit your team or could potentially benefit your team. This, of course, is interesting in combination with the mass sleep that she could do. Now that's all about her skill set, and admittedly it's quite a lot to take in. She has a lot of potential for any sleep team, but of course especially Dark, Earth and Fire units need to be afraid of her, and you don't necessarily want to run them on your own team with her, considering the effect she potentially has with the mass sleep on them as well. One exception on your own team or also on the enemy team might be units with a stealth shield, so Kaguya or Angel Dark Gene might be okay, also considering their higher speed, so they can set that up before Water Sleeping Beauty gets the turn. Fire units without Mega Healing Burn might not be that lucky, for example Gilgamesh. Now even if you have units that are just affected by her mass sleep for 50 time units, so any units of the light, water or storm element, keep in mind that if that unit gets the turn within those 50 time units and is still sleeping, they will get another 100 time units added on top before they get another turn. This makes her somewhat better against these kinds of elements, but is also something to consider on your own team if you run her, if you have units with lower speed than her in the starting lineup. Starting lineup might be where you want to use her, considering that she doesn't have any entry skills and the survivability isn't super high. Yes, she has that kind of special hold ground plus that is weak to poison. If any unit is sleeping on the battlefield, which might be easy to achieve if you run a sleep team. But we have more and more units in the meta that are actually ignoring passive skills that keep you alive, so this can be ignored quite as well. There's not a lot of HP recovery options for this Water Sleeping Beauty, to be honest. On the other hand, her survivability seems a bit better than Otohime's. All in all, I do think she is a bit difficult to use, so this will most probably hold her back in the SSR world rankings and my tier list. And again, I said something similar, I think, about Giga Rolosha 1 year ago, and then after a few months, the meta development meant that she got more and more viable. Maybe we see something similar here, because in a sleep team, she certainly has a lot of potential, especially when it's about shutting down a burn team or position. As always, I will post a video with battle footage in top level arena of her as soon as possible, and I would really recommend you wait for that and even potentially my summon or skip review, or potentially even longer for Fountain that will come while her banner is up. So then you will also get some nice Fountain rewards from it and hopefully not miss the 30k Fountain because of it. And if you can wait just a little bit longer, I would actually wait until 1 week from now when we get a first look at Rapunzel, who might just turn out to be more of a must-have than Water Sleeping Beauty. Thanks to Helios for the skill animations shown in this video even before her release. Don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. And as always, thanks for watching.